Standardization of language and literacy. So in this module, we try to explore how is a standardized language important for literacy and what is the relationship between the two. Now, why do we want to teach us a standard language? We want to teach a standard language to our students or to our children because standard language, by the codes it gives or the specific meanings attached to certain codes, allows us to communicate across different communities which otherwise would not be able to understand each other and may not be able to carry on an academic or intelligent discourse. For instance, let me give you an example. If we all understand what do we mean by empowerment, for instance, and we understand that the term empowerment in a standard language that I am using means that, we agree upon that kind of definition, and all of us then can talk about issues related to empowerment. For instance, when we say this is critically important, so the term critically means different from how we use it in real life and how we use it in academic literature. So we prepare our learners or those who come to us in schools to sort of participate in that kind of dialogue and in that kind of abstract thinking that is needed. So that is why teaching the standard language is extremely important in the schools. And that is precisely the reason that in schools you do not just have content knowledge in a standard language. You go to a lot of pains to teach those standard languages being used in schools, or those languages that have been given the status of your national language. You go to great pains in teaching those languages themselves. Now, schools, especially educational institutions, are actually the guardians of the standard language. So this would mean that they pay specific attention to how a language is used, and they draw attention of the teachers and of the learners of how the language should be used. And this type of conformity is imposed or regulated through some sanctions. So you give less grades to a child who might have explained the same construct but not using the basic academic register of that discipline. Similarly, you might give more marks to that person who at least appears to have expressed himself or herself in an academic language. So what does it mean to standardize a language or to guard a language? This means that you insist that certain specific features of language use are always followed. And if they are not followed, you give either some sort of feedback or there are some repercussions. Having said that, please remember, as we said before, there is no such thing as this inherent superiority of one language over the other. Once in an interview I was taking of a private school student, I asked that student about his creative writing skills, and he said, well, I can write very well in English, but Urdu. Urdu is not creative itself, so Urdu is not creative. Now, I was very surprised because this student who had been studying actually in a metric system, and if you pick up this matriculation book, Urdu book, textbook, it is full of literature and beautiful Urdu literature. But because of certain ideologies, he thought that English was inherently superior to Urdu, which is a completely ideological, hegemonic notion. So this is exactly what I was saying. Ideologies and standardization processes are at work when we consider one language as superior to the others. So we consider it, but it is not in there. So a standard language is definitely related to literacy. So when we talk about literacy, we talk about a person's competency to use a standard language and relate it to content. Similarly, the standard language use itself is also an important aspect of literacy. And it is the medium of literacy also. And this is why it is emphasized very strongly in your schools. And then, of course, all your teaching, learning is not only done in the standard language. When you assess children, you assess them in the standard language use. So the students are compelled to use the standard language, and acquisition of standard language, that is why is extremely important for minorities, because this allows them to participate in the wider socio-cultural context and gives them that kind of acceptability that they want to come to them with their education. So, competency in a standard language seems to be taken up as a competency in education itself. However, it is argued that its exclusive use in schools might not be very helpful for everyone.